Welcome to another Liquid Bullet. Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productions. I'm very pleased to have BRIAR Lee Mitchell back for a part two. If you have missed part one and come straight to part two, please go back and check part one. There's some absolute brilliant content in there involving serial killers and findings of body remains. It's all in there. Please check out part one. Welcome back on, BRIAR.
Thank you. I'm having a good time doing this, and
I've absolutely been shocked by the part one we did. It was absolutely amazing stuff, and like I say, I can't wait to read your books. They're amazing. BRIAR, can I just start with, obviously, we've already touched on a little bit of your sort of search and finds and stuff. Can I ask you what goes into sort of the training, or what goes into actually making a dog into a Cavernard dog?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting topic. Most people don't quite wrap their head around how is a dog going to go out in the wilderness and look for a deceased human being when there's the dead possum over there and there's a dead raccoon over there, and how do they know the difference? Every human being, when you're alive, for live find dogs, every human being has a unique scent. It has to do with what you're eating. Do you smoke? Did you have a drink the night before? All of those things go into the makeup of your scent. And with the live find dogs, and I had one, a Labrador named Barty, and you give them a scent article and they smell that scent and they remember it, and they can track you for miles, and sometimes they can track you years after you went through an area. Cadaver dog is very different. The second you die, every dead person will tend to smell the same. It's that decomposition. Human remains, any animal that dies, the bones, the muscles, everything starts to break down exactly the same way, and it takes on that same scent. Human scent, though, is a little different, and it's very unique when human remains start to decompose. So the only way you can train a cadaver dog is with human scent. And I trained a lot with different police departments, primarily here in Florida, over in on the east side with the sheriff's department near Titusville. And it gets a little gruesome sounding, but it's the only way you can do it is to actually use pieces of human body. And I would also use what was known as decomp. When a person is in the coroner's autopsy suite and they're being autopsied, when you open the human body up, there's a lot of fluid in there, and they actually use a ladle and ladle it out and set it aside so that they can examine any wounds, they could look for disease, they could look at the bones, the organs, and so on. But that fluid is set aside, and that's what's known in the parlance as decomp. And because I have a doctorate and I also have a master's in medical art, I had no problem being able to call the coroner's office explaining who I was. Could I get some decomp? I did that 10 years ago when I first moved to Florida. Yeah, we have some set aside. They had like 15 gallons of it. I had to take all these containers. It was like this big, huge grouping of containers. Each container would be about so high, about this big around. And it's just filled with fluid that was ladled out of a dead person's body. The beauty of it is that all this decomp gets mixed together, so it just takes on the aroma of a dead human being, which is very different from the dead possum. It is very different from the dead raccoon that the dog might encounter out there. And the way you train the dogs is to turn it into a game. What's the game? Well, we're going to go look for whatever it is you're going to give them as the signal. Now, my command to my dog, and his name was Thor. He was a great big black dog. He was like a type of a pit bull, and just beautiful dog. He was a mutt that I rescued from a shelter, and he was able to certify before just the week he turned a year old, which was amazing because most dogs it takes about 2 years to train them. He was really attuned to this. He was very good at it, which is why he was able to find what he was able to find. You then start to introduce them to the scent. And when you give them a command, you want to give them a command that's something they would only hear from you and not from all the other 50 people there at the search area. Like you don't say, go search, find body. I would say, go find Debbie. Find Debbie. When you look at reports from the police, if they find a dead body, they shorten it to DB. Dead body, Debbie. So that's what it was. Okay, find Debbie, and you have a harness on. A lot of the dogs have trackers, and as I was telling you earlier, I would be in some really remote areas. If someone's going to murder somebody else, that tends to be a little remote. And for suicides also, they would tend to go someplace they wanted to have a beautiful last image before they would kill themselves. So it would be a little remote. And you train the dogs as a game. Find Debbie. Dog finds Debbie. What's the alert going to be? Some dogs, they'll bark. Others will lay down. Some do what's called a recall. They come back to you and go, hey, there's something over here. Come over here. And then they lead you back. My dog, Thor, was always on a 30-foot lead with a harness and a GPS tracker that I would carry. And he had one also. So we have 2 GPS tracks for the base camp to give to the authorities so they knew exactly where I might find anything, a clue, piece of a body part. And he would sit. He was a great big black dog, beautiful black dog, and he would find some, boom. He'd just sit and he'd stare right at it. And you may not see it. And here's why. When you train the dogs, you want to be able to train them to find something that's laying on the ground, something that might be obscured. Could be leaves fell on it. It could be that growth has come up over it, leaves and bushes and whatnot. And then there's also the elevated. If you have a suicide especially, they sometimes hang themselves. And you're out there looking around like this for a body when it's way up there, 30 feet up in the air. And so the dogs will do that. And he would sit, look right up. And there I'd find whatever it is the testing instructor would put out for him. And the dogs have to be certified, which they would do every 2 years. And it would be the concealed, it would be buried, it would be out in the open, it would be elevated, and then you'd have blank areas where you'd have to come back and say, nothing there. And that is equally as important because if you are, say, looking for a body in 500 or 600 acres of wilderness, the more you can start to eliminate areas and focus on other areas, the faster you're going to have success on the search. And for him, I would give him a piece of cookies that I would bake for him out of oatmeal and banana, and that would be his reward for solving the puzzle and winning the game. And that's how we train him.
Wow. So with the reward, it's like the cookie you say. Would you have to sort of only treat them with that sort of stuff when they're working? Or...
Right. Exactly. I would only give him those cookies I'd bake for him if I was training or out on an actual search and he found something, because that was a special reward, and that's what they work for, and makes the dogs work faster and work better. It isn't coercion. You can't force an animal to go do something like this. It has to be fun for them. And it would be a little odd occasionally. We would try to work the dogs away from any media, away from the press, for example. First of all, you don't want to contaminate any areas we're searching where a news crew shows up and then they can actually create havoc in a crime scene area. What we didn't want them to see was we'd get the dogs pumped up. Hey, we're going to go search. We're going to go find something. We're going to have a good time. And we'd be out looking for a dead body. So it would be a little odd to people, but they're dogs. For them, it was a fun game. And we would keep it as much of a fun game as possible, even though we were involved in something that was very tragic, mostly. But that's how you do it. That's how you get your dog to do it.
Yeah, it's
Any
amazing.
dog
It's
can do it,
amazing.
by the way. Any dog can do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, like, because obviously some dogs have better senses to different things, don't they? But any dog can train for that, yeah.
Any dog has dogs have much more nerve endings in their nose than humans do. You'll typically see bloodhounds on live finds. Bloodhounds are hysterical to work with because they get their nose right on the ground and they make this noise. They make this snuffling sound as they go along, and they're smelling everything. You know, they're getting dirt and bugs off their nose. They don't care. That's how they search. My dog Barty, who was a Labrador, he put his head up and he'd go like this, back and forth, back, and he'd go, "Oh, wait, there's something coming from that direction," and then you just let the dog work. You just let him work. The dogs that would have difficulty doing it are the ones with the really short faces. Some of the boxers or pugs, they just don't have enough physical nose space to be able to do it as well as a dog that has a longer nose. Makes sense to it. There were two famous dogs I loved following when I was doing this. One was out in Colorado, I believe, in the mountainous area. An amazing, amazing live find dog that would find skiers buried under just mounds of snow. And it was a standard poodle. You'd see this great big white poodle with the flopping ears and the orange vest on, bounding through the snow, and then just stop. 30 feet down, there'd be somebody that would have died otherwise had that dog not been there. The other amazing dog that I would love following was in Japan. And you have wilderness search and rescue, which is what I did, but you also have urban. Let's say a tornado blows through an area or there's an earthquake and buildings have come down in Japan, where that can happen frequently. One of the best dogs was a Chihuahua. A little dog, and they would go into these buildings that would all come down. There was no room to move around. The dog could go in and come right back out and tell you whether or not, yep, there's something in there, live person, dead person, or there's nobody in there. And then they could start to eliminate areas. But that little Chihuahua was amazing. So yeah, pretty much any dog can do it. They can. They're amazing animals.
So, sorry, but just one last question on the dog situation. So, if there's something buried and the dog can smell it, how sort of far do you have to search in that area of where the dog sort of sensed it?
How far out would we go if the dog thinks there's something buried?
Yeah, so if your dog stops and is sort of pointing into the ground, would that be sort of pinpointed on that position the dog is, or would that be spread out further?
Mostly it's primarily boom right there. The dog goes to the strongest sense source. But as I was telling you earlier, if there's somebody like a murder victim and their killer buried them out in the woods somewhere, if they've been there a long time, and I mean, we're talking 10, 20 years, all of that growth that grows up around where that body is underground brings all the carbon up, brings all the scent. And the dogs, you'll see them go around looking up. And if they do that in the wilderness, unless there's somebody hung themselves up there, and you can usually find them pretty fast when you're looking up at that point, you know that the scent is in the foliage. Just let the dog work, and the dog will start to go all around, and then they'll keep coming back to a specific area. And once they do their final full alert, dig down, and you're pretty much going to find a body right there.
Wow, amazing. Right, can I just ask you, what's been your sort of most successful find to date?
My most successful find was I was describing that to you in Georgia, where a young man, he was to me young, he was 28, went out with his dog walking and in a rural area. He was known to have had a type of brain condition with extra blood vessels, and apparently they burst when he was walking and he just dropped dead. And the dog came home 3 days later. A year went by, 2 years went by. Search teams are scouring the neighborhood. They can't find this man. He had walked into the side of a farmer's field, and the farmer had decided to let that part of his farm go fallow, which means you just let everything grow, let the earth absorb nutrients again. So he was in 5 feet of thorn bushes, and we used ATVs going backwards to flatten the bushes. And my dog came in along with others. We found parts of him all over the place because of predation. Animals will spread the bones. Found his head inside of an anthill. But what I was able to find with my dog and working on the site and with a stick moving foliage around was a lot more of him in a different area. And that's where I found his cell phone. And detectives were really keen on finding his cell phone. They wanted to see what his messages were. Was he receiving threatening messages from anybody? What were the conversations that he had? Because if you're out there walking your dog, a lot of people have their cell phone with them and they're just yakking away with people. And had there been any sense of foul play, that would have changed the whole situation. But I did find out that when his bones were tested and everything else was checked out in the area, it was determined he died of natural causes. But having that cell phone was very much part of that um, investigation and that search. And the detective came to me later and thanked me profusely for finding the phone, because even if they hadn't found him, that was one of the very first things they wanted to get their hands on, was his cell phone. And I was so grateful that we were able to help that family and the detectives there.
It must be quite rewarding for you to actually, you know, solve a case or help solve the case. Do you ever get any sort of thanks from the families, or you know, from
Yes.
closing the case?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have. And in fact, in that case, one of the cousins was there who came and talked to me, and um, the parents were there. The parents were there when we found him, and um, we backed off and let the police talk to him. It was very emotional. So we do get letters from them, uh, gifts, you know. And I remember on one search, we found the man a little further north here in Florida. He was a suicide. His mom was out. It was pouring rain. It was miserable. We were out finding him. We were able to locate his body. Some kids actually saw something weird, and we brought the dogs down. He had drowned himself in one of the ponds on the edge of like this golf course. And the mom had just come at us with all this, you know, some money in her hands, and we said, no, we're all volunteers. This is what we do. We're volunteers, and we take that very seriously. We do not take gifts, money, anything from the families. You just can't. It just you just can't do that. We were the volunteers, and most dog teams that you see are volunteers. It
Wow.
takes a lot of money, a lot of time to train a dog team, and you have to do it on a really regular basis, or the dog is like, what? I forgot what you had me doing 6 months ago. I would train with my dogs once to twice a week, every week for 10 years, because you have to do that to stay as a team, a good working team, and to be able to pass the certification. And sometimes when I was on searches, I remember on one search, the daughter had been murdered. She was found. I can't tell you about the case because it's still in the courts, but she was right there with us, walking through the mud, looking for her daughter with us.
Yeah. So really, you come across, you know, probably a lot of emotional challenges as well with your work, don't you?
With that, yes. And we would give the family lots of space and just let them talk with the authorities. Our job was done. And so we would back away um, and know that we had helped.
Yeah. How does that affect your home life? Sort of when, once your work's finished and you know trying to go to bed, does things
I
play on your
know.
mind or thoughts? Or
Yeah, I on some of those searches when we'd find something, or like when he found my dog found cremains here in Florida of two men that had been missing for a while. When you cremate somebody and you get that package of remains that are all it's ash, that's called cremains. And this woman had lost her husband and her brother-in-law. They had moved, and the moving company took the boxes of the remains and didn't know where they put them. And they were somewhere on this animal sanctuary where my dog went to search. There were bears, there were tigers, two leopards, a bunch of lemurs, and my dog is having to work through all those scents. And he found both of them. It only took him 20 minutes.
wow,
And I came back to her and I said, my dog just alerted. And she said, you just got here. I said, well, he's telling me they're right in this closet, in this storage shed you have here on this animal sanctuary. And that's exactly where they were. They were right at the bottom underneath all these boxes that had been stored on top. And he found them with all that around them. That was she'd been missing his husband, her husband, for a while. So yeah, when we would find things like that, especially people like with the one in Georgia where the family was just devastated at the loss of this man, and the one further north that I can't talk about, the murder victim. Um, every time we do a search, her family was from New York. They would fly down, and the whole family out there with their boots on in the mud walking with us. And part of me would think, I hope to God I do not find anything when that mom is standing right there with me. I don't know how I could handle that. And then part of you is like, I hope we find her. And this murder victim was finally found. I think it was just earlier last year. So it gives them some closure. But yeah, you do replay it in your mind like, oh my gosh, that person would still be out there. Family would not know. I did talk with one of the serial killers I interviewed about this phenomenon, Keith Jesperson, because I'm trying to identify some of his victims and find the missing one. And he said to me when he found out one of his victims had finally been identified, he said it's really a double-edged sword in that, yeah, you're grateful that you finally identify who these bones were part of, who this person was. But then it also takes away that last little bit of hope the family might have had that their missing loved one is still alive. And so it's the same thing with the search and rescue. You're like, I hope I find this. Oh, I hope I don't. It's the same thing. We did on one search, we were looking for a body, and she was still alive. I came
Wow,
back and
amazing.
I was out there with my dog in this ravine going through the muck and the mud. And these people came down from this apartment building. Of course, I have all this bright yellow orange stuff on. You can see me, and we're all covered with, radios and this and that. We look very official. Someone came down and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "We're looking for this person." And I showed a flyer. Did you recognize this woman? Yeah, I saw her last week. Where? Because she was supposed to have been dead quite a while, like a couple of months. No, she's been living in the bushes by the mall. And that's where she
Wow.
was. Police went right over. I gave them the report. And I said, well, you might want to check this out because they said this was her in the picture I showed them. And it was her. She was alive. She'd had dementia. And she was living in the bushes next to a shopping mall for months. So that was a weird one, but it had a very happy ending, in my opinion. It had a happy ending.
Right, just a random question. I've just
Yep.
come to mind. Um, are you aware of the Madeleine McCann case?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Can I just ask you your opinion there? Because obviously they used the Kavanaugh dog there that traced for blood, and then they sort of wrote it off, didn't they? What's your opinion from sort of handling dogs?
Uh, in that particular instance, if they did find some blood, I don't think it was hers. I don't. I don't think she was injured in any way. I think she was taken. I don't think the parents did anything to her. I don't. I've looked at documentaries on it, and if she was alive, and I honestly think she still is, I do. She would probably be about 18, 17, or 18 years old by now if she was taken into the sex traffic, which happens by the thousands. It's stunning the numbers. I think that's what happened to her, and that what the dogs picked up on. If you watch the documentary or you look at any of the police reports, they'll mention the dogs picked up on blood in a rental car. Do you remember seeing something
Yeah,
about that?
that's
That was
correct.
a
Yeah.
rental car that they rented after she disappeared.
Ah, right. Okay.
And so someone could have been in there and had a cut finger or whatever. And yeah, the dog is going to pick up on it because the dog isn't going to go, oh, no, that's Madeleine's blood. They're just going
Ah,
to
so
go,
the dog just picked up on blood, not her blood as such.
right, just human blood. And there was something that was
Right.
found. I think it was in the trunk of the car. If you imagine you cut your finger, you're putting clothes in the trunk. Yeah, there's going to be blood source there, and it's going to be there for a long, long time. That, in my opinion, is what happened in that case. And I still hold out that she will resurface and hopefully be able to get her life back. In the United States alone, there are at any given time 800,000 missing people.
Wow.
I know the numbers are staggering. So could she still be alive, and was she sex trafficked? Yeah. Will she come back and resurface and get her life back? I hope so. I do. But in the case of that car, and people can look at that documentary again and see exactly what it is I was talking about, that the car was rented after she went missing, that the family rented to be able to go and meet with the police and whatnot.
Touch back on, obviously we've done a little bit in part one about actually speaking to the serial killers. Would you just be able to name some of the serial killers that you actually worked with?
Absolutely. Well, I've mentioned Keith Hunter Jesperson. He's the happy face killer. Todd Colehep. He's incarcerated for life in South Carolina. Talk with him a lot, sometimes daily. By talking with him, it's through messaging. That messaging system I was describing that these third party companies use. Some of these inmates call me. Dennis Rader calls me every Saturday afternoon. We talk for about an hour. Keith Jesperson writes a lot. I've probably got 200 or 300 pages of written notes from Keith because he wants to talk with me about possibly doing a book about his first murder. And I'm considering it because 2 people went to prison for 9 years for a murder he committed. And
Wow, so actually it's like a miscarriage of justice then on that case.
Yeah, the woman didn't like her boyfriend anymore. He had a record, and if he violated a parole situation, he could go back to prison. That was her brilliant idea, was to tell the police that, yeah, my boyfriend killed that woman you found in the woods. She really dug her own grave, literally. They ended up in federal penitentiary for 9 years. They're both passed now, but that was crazy. And I'm thinking of doing a book about that when he killed his first victim, Tanya Bennett. Other ones I've interviewed, Bernard Eugene Giles. He's, as I told you, here in Florida. Also, Christine Falling. She's here in Florida, and we have talked. Christine is her. If you know, a lot of these serial killers and even rampage killers have nicknames that the press give to them. And hers was the babysitter killer. She suffocated, I think it was 5 babies that she was babysitting, and one older man. I don't know. She just looked at him and covered up his mouth and nose and suffocated him, sitting right there in his wheelchair. And when the judge asked her, and I think she was 19 when she was sentenced. Yeah, I think she was 19. And she's
only 19.
60s now. She's been in prison for a long time. Judge asked her, "Why did you do this?" And she said, "I don't know. I just wanted to choke him." And I'll tell you, every single serial killer I interviewed, we're all different from each other. I mean, miles apart in why they did it, what their motivation was, their method of killing. They were all so different. I thought, oh, they're all going to be raving psychopaths. They're very different from each other. Very, very different. I did interview Nico Jenkins. He's a rampage killer. He's sentenced to death. He's on death row in Nebraska.
Is he the guy with all the tattoos on his face and
that's Nico?
And all the scars and stuff, isn't he?
Yeah, he's got a lot of scars. He's got a huge round on his face. He also mutilated himself. He somehow, no one knows how, but he gets razor blades into his prison cell. He claims that he is a son of Isis, the goddess of life and other things from ancient Egypt. And therefore, he loves and admires women. So when I contacted him for an interview and he realized I was a woman, he telephoned me and talking 90 miles an hour. And I would ask him a question and he would stop, get real quiet, and he'd answer very slowly and methodically. And he was told by the god Apophis, who is a serpent-looking god, to go out and kill people. He had been in prison for like 15 years for carjacking. He kept telling the officials, if you let me out, I'm just going to go kill people. They let him out. And within, I think it was 4 days or something after he was released, I can't remember the exact amount of time. No, he killed 4 people shortly after he was released from prison. One was a woman. And he said Apophis told him to kill her as well. And he took her vehicle and then abandoned it a short while away. But he claimed that voices told him to do that. So he'd get these razor blades and he split his tongue down the middle so it kind of looked like a serpent's tongue. And then he amputated part of his penis so that it would look more like a reptile's head. Some psychiatrists believe he is psychotic and a schizophrenic. Schizophrenics are the ones that will hear the voices, like Herbert Mullen did. Um, they, meaning the different psychiatrists who've interviewed him, are on the fence. They don't know if it's an act, but he has mutilated his face, he's mutilated his genitals, his tongue, all claiming that the gods are telling him to do this. So I don't know. He was an interesting character. Nicholas, or Nick Chalet, I interviewed him. He's at Joliet Prison in Illinois. And he is what's known as a spree killer or a rampage killer, but more likely a spree killer because he killed, I think it was 10 people, beat them all to death with a hammer, including a 2-year-old boy, the son of his ex-wife or something like that. I have to check my facts, but he did kill him with a hammer. Some of the other people that I also interviewed, Scott DeCari, he's the Seal Beach killer, a rampage killer. He was mad at his wife. They were divorced. The courts gave their son to his wife, and the son kept showing up on his visits with bruises and a broken arm, and, oh, my mom did it. And he kept trying to tell the authorities, you know, my son's being abused by my ex-wife. They did nothing, so he got a gun and shot the entire beauty parlor up at Seal Beach where she was at the back. So as he's going through looking to kill her, he's killing everybody in his way just to get to her. And then came out and somebody was just parked next to his car, killed them too. He was in a rage, just a rage, absolute insane rage. So those are some of the ones that I've interviewed. William Devlin Howell, very interesting. He's in Connecticut. He gave himself his own nickname. Dennis Rader gave himself the nickname BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill. Most of the other ones are given their nicknames by reporters, the press, you know, to give them a little more notoriety. Bill nicknamed himself the Sick Ripper. And he wasn't about killing, he was about rape. He would pick up prostitutes, he had a van, he would hold them prisoner in his van, sometimes for a few days. And then he would kill them, usually strangulation. And he put them in what he called his garden. And this was behind a huge shopping mall in Connecticut, Grand Britain, or Grand Britain, I think it was, something like that, where he would bury them back there in his garden. I was just good. And he'd call me from his cell, and we would chat about his famous Rice Krispies recipe. I make the best Rice Krispie treats, Briar. I have a crock pot here. I make these things, and the conversations could get very, very entertaining. And
Yeah.
as I said, I left them verbatim. I will tell you that 3 of the ones I interviewed, and some of them I won't tell you their names because they spoke about violence, especially wanting to do violence about other prisoners where they were housed. And it's not my position, in my opinion, to do that, because then immediately they are thrown into solitary or something happens. And in prison, you don't want to get in trouble with the authorities because it takes forever to sort out what happened. So if as long as they weren't going to do something violent and they only wanted to talk about what they wanted to do to somebody else, I left them anonymous. Hopefully that makes sense. But you'll read about some of those accounts in the book. This one, you know, I was going to slice that guy's throat because he pissed me off. Okay, what would you slice his throat with? I have a pencil sharpener. There's a blade in it. Little tiny blade.
Yeah, wow.
But after talking to this prisoner, he would have done it. He would have killed this man by slicing his throat open. Didn't matter how many times it took him, he was going to kill him.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it was averted, and he didn't do it. But I know I'm kind of rambling a bit. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's a real insight and an eye-opener to some of it. Yeah, yeah. So, Briar, is there anything else you want to talk about to us today?
Well, I just hope that I'm considering. I'm hoping people let me know their thoughts on the book, because it will determine whether or not I do a sequel. One of the editors I work with, I kept saying to them, I can't finish the book. Everyone keeps coming back with more stories and more this and that. And he said, well, then save it for a sequel. So I may do that. I may do the Tanya Bennett case. That was the first victim of Keith Hunter Jesperson, where he beat her to death and then strangled her and discarded her body off the highway in Oregon. And that I'm considering doing, because how two totally innocent people ended up in prison for 9 years just befuddles me. And also, if people are reading the book and they have a question about a serial killer that they would like to know something more about, let me know, because I may want to research it and have them in an upcoming book. So I've had so much fun talking with you, Lee.
It's been really amazing, and obviously, in the UK, some of the American cases, unless they're really high profile, we don't hear about. So there's been some new ones for us to look at as well, which has been great. And I know a lot of our viewers all like the true crime and the murders, so I think it'd be a real good viewing for everyone. So well, thank you ever so much for sharing your story with us.
I was delighted to do so, and the book releases January 5th, 2023. You can do pre-orders now. They're all available on Amazon. And when you look at the book, you see there's a link in there to my website, which is my name, BRIARLeeMitchell.com. And there's a whole section in there just about that particular book. And there's an email chart in there that you can send me messages. That's how I stay in touch with my readers. Lee, it's been so much fun, and I hope to be able to do another interview with you down the road.
Yeah, lovely. I think once, just an idea, once a few of the viewers watch our footage, we've done it with a couple of other interviews. Some of the viewers like to ask questions, so maybe we could collect a collaboration of questions from the viewers to ask you if you come on again.
Absolutely. I would absolutely love to do that with you. I try to cover as many different aspects of the book and my background to be able to make the show work for people to understand what the book's about. But yeah, if people have questions and you want to talk more about all of these people I interviewed and where I may be going next with my books, I would be delighted to do that with you.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much, BRIAR. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
All right,
thank you so much. Thank you.